Tonight's shiur is called What's in It for Me? And it is built around the test, the trial of Avraham Avinu. And the verse reads, Vayomer Hashem el Avram. The Mishnah in Pirkei Avot tells us that Avraham Avinu was tested with 10 tests, 10 trials he went through before becoming a forefather. This one, which we are going to be speaking about, is one of them. According to Maimonides, in his commentary to the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, in fact, this is the first one. According to Rabbeinu Yonah, which was his cousin, this is the second one, which we'll discuss, according to his opinion, what was the first one in a minute. But according to all opinions, this is one of the trials, the tests of Avraham Avinu, forging him, making him into a forefather, testing his mettle, so to speak, to see whether he's fitting to be a forefather. There were righteous people that preceded Avraham Avinu, but were not a forefather to the Jewish nation, were not considered the first Jew. So what distinguished Avraham Avinu from others? And the verse reads as follows. Vayomer Hashem el Avram, and Hashem spoke to Avram. And he commanded him, Lech lecha, go for yourself, or go forward. Literally translated, go for yourself. Me'artzecha, from your land. Umemolatetecha, and from the place of your birth, umibet avicha, and from the house of your father. If we have a chance in the end, we will discuss why does God command him to leave your land, the place of your birth, your land, the place of your birth, and the house of your father. When you tell someone, go travel, go, leave, you don't need to say that you're leaving this place and going there. Furthermore, why didn't God tell him where? He just told him to the land where I will show you. He didn't tell him where. But if you would tell, if it would have been enough, leave where you are, leave your land, or leave where you are, and go forth and travel to the land that I will show you. Why did God have to specify these 3 places? If we have time, we will discuss that at the end of the shiur. To the land that I will show you. And I will make you into a great nation. And I will bless you. And I will make your name great. And you will be a blessing. Prior to this revelation, we know that the Torah has 2 dimensions, the written Torah and the oral Torah. In the oral Torah, it's recorded, this Avraham Avinu was 75 years old here. He already served God for many years. He was a spiritual hero and giant already for many, many years. He stood up for monotheism to the extent that he was thrown into a kivshan esh, into a fiery furnace by King Nimrod, who proclaimed himself a god and wanted everyone to bow down to him, and Avraham Avinu refused, and he was thrown into a fiery furnace. Which means the fact that Avraham Avinu refused shows a willingness to give up his life for what he believed in. When push came to shove, he stood up, he stood his ground, he stood for what he believed in, to such an extent that he was willing to forgo his life. So we see who we're talking about here. A giant. God now tests him. And he says, leave your land. The question is, how is this a test? Because if God is telling him, leave your land, and I will make you into a great nation. Abraham Avinu at that time did not have children. Telling Abraham Avinu that you will be a great nation implies that you will have children. Have a look what Rashi says. Rashi, the foremost commentary, says as follows. Lech lecha, go forth or go for yourself. Rashi says, le'anatcha letovatcha, for your own benefit, for your own good. Sham e'escha legoy gadol, there, in the land where I will show you, I'll make you into a great nation. Kan, yata zoche lebanim. Here, you are not destined to have children. According to the commentaries, they explain, because very simply, that was a land that was very much associated with idol worship, and Abraham Avinu had to travel away and out of idol worship before he could father a nation. Remember, the first of the 2 Ten Commandments is, I am the Lord your God, and there shall not be any other gods before you. These are the major principles and foundations of our faith by which stands all of the 613 commandments. The positive commandments, its rooted and its source is, I am the Lord your God, accepting upon ourselves God as our Lord, as our God. And thus, we accept upon ourselves, by extension, of course, the positive commandments. There shall not be any other God before you. Means to say, not proclaiming any other God or any other influence whatsoever, that we will stray and desecrate God's law, God forbid. That is the root of the 365 negative commandments. So there are those that say that it was a necessary step for Abraham Avinu to father the Jewish nation. It's not enough just to accept upon yourself the one God, monotheism, but one has to distance oneself to the greatest of degree from idol worship, which those lands were full of idol worship. Not to say that at that time, the land of Israel, or the land where God will show him, which eventuated to be the land of Israel, was bereft of idol worship. It also was, but it was the land that was destined for the Jewish people. It's the land by which the Bible itself records that God's eye is set upon it from the beginning of the year until the end of the year. It is a holy land. It is God's palace, so to speak. So God's palace is more conducive to the oneness of God. And that was where Abraham Avinu was to build his nation. For the 3 forefathers, the 2 forefathers that were born after this were born in the land of Israel. So Rashi says, here you're not destined to have children, but there you will have children. Furthermore, I want you to go forth because I want the world to know who you are. I want the world to get to know your nature, your character, that you are a person of faith and of belief, and you are willing to stand up for your belief. You're willing to give up your life for that belief. Go forward, because by going forward you will proclaim the oneness of God. And I will make you into a great nation. Since, says Rashi, by traveling, it reduces the possibility of procreation. When one is traveling, one is overly concerned, one is stressed because of the journey. And this is something that reduces procreation. Similarly, it reduces a person's assets, especially since you're leaving behind all of the assets. We know that so many Jews left Arab lands. They left behind a lot of wealth. They were forced to leave, they were forced to flee, they left behind a lot of wealth. The travel itself causes a person to diminish his wealth. And furthermore, it reduces one's name because you go, or one's honor, because you go from a place where you've earned a reputation to a place where nobody knows you. It takes a long time to build a reputation. God blessed him with these 3 blessings. You become a great nation. I will make your name known, and I will bless you. i.e. children, your honor, and your wealth. Shiftecho al habanim v'al hamamon v'al Hashem, for God promised him, God blessed him with these three blessings: children, wealth, and honor. What's interesting is that Rashi brings another interpretation. Veheye beracha, and you will be for a blessing. Rashi brings one explanation, and he says, you will be a blessing, blessing will be to you, meaning to say that you will have the power to bless. So much did God love Abraham Avinu that he gave him the ability to bless, and whoever would bless would come true. However, Rashi quotes another interpretation. And he says, Ve'escha legoy gadol, and I will make you into a great nation. What's the blessing of that? What's the definition? Zeh sheomrim Elokei Abraham. The fact that in the future there will be your great-great-grandchildren for generations and generations to come until the coming of Mashiach, that will mention your name in the Amidah every day, 3 times a day. In the Amidah we say, blessed you, God, God of our forefathers, God of Abraham, God of Isaac, and God of Jacob. And then we end off the blessing, Baruch Atah Hashem, Magen Abraham, blessed you, the guardian of Abraham. What type of blessing is this? So he says like this, Ve'escha legoy gadol, you will become a great nation. This will be the fact that your children and your children's children forevermore will mention your name and associated with my name, the God of Abraham. Ve'avarechacha, and I will bless you. In which way I will bless you? That your children's children will also mention your son's name, and that is the God of Isaac. In other words, you will have children who will follow in your footsteps and will be so great, almost equal to you, and that your children's children will recognize the greatness of your son. V'hagadela shemecha, and I will make your name great. This is the mention of Elokei Yaakov, the third forefather, how we mentioned the God of Jacob. Yachol yihyu hotmim bechulan. One may perhaps think that at the end of the blessing of the Amidah, when we mention, blessed you, God, the God of our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, blessed you, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, or Jacob, Isaac, and Abraham. No. For it says, for you will be a blessing, means to say that there will be a qualitative edge because you pioneered this, you over the other 2 forefathers. And that is why we only end off with Magen Abraham, blessed be the guardian of Abraham. Which means that there are 2 dimensions to these blessings. One dimension is the physical blessings that we mentioned before, children, wealth, and honor. In other words, God is promising him children, wealth, and honor. The other blessing is totally associated with children. And the association with children is in connection to their adherence and their loyalty to God. How so? Because we start off the blessing by saying, blessed you, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu, blessed you our God. The God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Why don't we say just blessed you, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Why do we say the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob? God forbid, there's only one God, and he's the God of everyone. Because each one forged his own connection to God in his own personal manner and felt God personally, and it permeated and penetrated his life and his way by which he lived. Not only in the manner by which he was taught and received from his father and grandfather, but rather they paved their own way. Excuse me. Each one with their own quality. And we know that Abraham had a particular quality and style. Isaac had a particular quality and style, and so did Jacob. Each one perfected their service of God with their quality, in addition to what they received from their father and grandfather. Excuse me. So there are two dimensions here. Let's see what this means. It is human nature. Thank you. It is human nature that we look after ourselves with everything. It's human nature. We can overcome it, we can go beyond it, but it's human nature. Generally, we ask, what's in it for me? I'm going to do this. What do I gain from this? What do I benefit from this? We become the center of everything. Sometimes it is obvious. Sometimes it's very subtle. We don't recognize to what degree. But quite often, even in regards to relationships, the relationships that we choose with people are not difficult ones. We don't want to have stressful relationships with people. We don't want to have relationships with people that is a burden. We don't have a relationship with people that is difficult and hard work. So the relationship that we choose, even though relationships are a give and take, and even though every relationship must have an element of give, but even such a relationship is also, and a lot, got to do with take. Because even the give that we give is only give to those that suits us to a certain degree. That's in regards to relationship. Then in regards to giving even to not people are associated with us, just charity, for example. There are those that people find it hard to give charity because what's in it for me? There are those that give charity for multiple rare reasons, because God has told us to give charity, and there's many verses that says whoever gives charity never loses, only gains. Charity saves from death. And all of these different things brings redemptions, brings blessings, brings a whole myriad of different things. And we want to merit for all of these things. So again, there is gain. There is a what's in it for me. Similarly, in regards to serving God, there's what's in it for me. What am I gaining? What am I gaining is on multiple levels. There are those who are beginners, so to speak, or perhaps all of us are on the level of beginners. And like Maimonides writes, that the way you train a child, you first train him with the carrot and the stick, so to speak, to the extent where ultimately you can slowly remove them and wean them off, by which a person recognizes that the nobility of doing good for good's sake. But even that can be associated very much so with what's in it for me. Conduct myself in a proper manner. There's a what's in it for me here. So how is this a test? You're telling me that this is the first, or perhaps according to Rabbeinu Yonah, this is the second test which proved that Abraham Avinu is worthy to go to the next test and be our forefather. How is this a test? There's a what's in it for me here. There's a what's in it for me. Abraham Avinu didn't have children. God is blessing with children. Who would not run? How much effort do people put when they have difficulties in having children to try and have children? To what effort, to what sacrifice they go through? So who would not be willing to move countries? That you call a test? Don't worry, God tells him. There's financial loss of here, you'll gain much more. How many people leave their country or their state because they could not afford to live here? My great-grandfather moved from Morocco to Jerusalem before my father or any other of his siblings were born, to Jerusalem because of his great love for Israel. The time that he moved was shocking times of starvation. My grandfather couldn't make a living. He was, how can you make a family? Young family that just got married, they want to make a family. How can you possibly bring a family to the world and support them like this. So he told my grandmother that we have to go back to Morocco, and she said, no, I'm staying here. You want, you go. That's to what extent people had love of Israel. Do you understand? This is what love of Israel is. It's unbelievable, a lot to learn from. But being ultimately the head of the household, who's responsible, has to take responsibility. It's all good and fine, have to support a family. So he said, let's ask your father, he's a rabbi. Indeed he was a great Kabbalist. And they went to him, what do we do? He said, you've got to go where you can support your family. So he went back to Morocco. People move from country to country in order to support their family. It's not the first time. This is a test, this is a trial. How is this a trial? How is this a test? There's what's in it for me here? That's a test. That's a how should I say? That's an incentive. Incentive. I'm confused. I'm putting together two words: incentive and something else. Forgot the other one now. But that's a sweetener over here. God is not telling him, listen, I want you to go to the land of Israel. That's a holy land, full stop. I want you to leave to the land where I will show you, full stop. He's telling him, listen, I'm going to give you wealth. I'm going to give you honor. I'm going to give you children. Everything that you could possibly want for. Who here, if he's offered big blessings, a big villa in Israel, with not a worry in the world for Parnassah, who here would not want to go to Israel and live in the holy land of Israel with all of your financial worries taken care of? Beautiful. And this is what is God offering him. The way we are built is that we have a body. And the body is drawn towards physical things. Naturally drawn towards physical things. And the soul is, or at least part of the soul is enclosed within that body and has to work within the difficulties of the body and the psyche of the body. Very difficult. Because the psyche of the body is what's in it for me, and the soul is pure godliness. Detached from what's in it for me. The soul is pure transcendence. Godliness, a part of God himself. Very hard for the soul to work within the body, because the mentality of the body is that what's in it for me. So the physical senses and the pleasures, the monetary gains, they're all fleeting. Yet the evil inclination or the natural animalistic drives of a person is to tend towards them. Spirituality is one that exists forever. I don't know whether any of you read books about people who've had after-death experiences, either those who were clinically dead for a certain period of time, or those that passed away and returned to family members. I read a very interesting book recently, of which this particular individual comes to his sister and tells and proves to her that that he knows everything what's going on and what's going on with her and shows her and all of that type of thing. And he discusses in the book, until he disappears forever, where she no longer hears from him, he relates to her the unbelievable feeling of the light that encompasses a person and love. Where on the one hand you feel that if you enter that sphere, you, so to speak, lose yourself. It's almost like you lose your identity. Yet the love that is given and that you feel there is something that is unparalleled, that can never be described in human terms. So it's been documented, although it's very difficult to express these words, things that we cannot relate to, but it's been documented that the spiritual bliss that is to be had through spirituality, through the path of godliness, is phenomenal. Therefore, every time, Lech Lecha, when God tells him, go forward, he's speaking to every single one of us, he's telling us, go forward, distance yourself from negativity, whenever you go, every step that you take forward closer to God is lecha, to your ultimate and greatest benefit whatsoever. Even though that physically and materially seems the other way around and doesn't make sense. And of course, in Abraham's journey, physically, materially, and in all aspects, it would not have benefited him unless God told him and promised him. Because normally, naturally, you leave your land, you leave everything behind. You don't gain from that, you only lose. God promised him that you will gain all of these three things, but ultimately you lose. So what God is telling us is that even though materially, to adhere to spirituality, it seems that we are losing, so to speak, we're not following our senses and our material feelings and impulses, lecha, the greatest benefit you will get. Now, even though there is a spiritual dimension of serving God, and the fact is that we were given an evil inclination, an animalistic soul, and that drives the greatest challenge of the human being to serve God, despite the fact that the normal tendencies of a human being is to be selfish and to what's in it for me, and to find whatever one can gain. But ultimately, bottom line, every rational human being can appreciate that when God wants to bestow his goodness upon us, because God is the essence of good, he does it in the best fashion possible. And the best fashion possible is by allowing us the ability to feel that we are earning our keep, what the Kabbalists refer to as nahama dichsufa, bread of shame. Nobody wants to eat bread of shame. Everybody wants to have an opportunity to earn his keep. Everybody wants to have an opportunity to maintain one's dignity. To be able to receive, just to receive without giving, is very shameful. The fact that we have all of these challenges within us is God's way of giving us the greatest gift of all, of allowing us to feel that we can somehow give to God's world, that we somehow earn our keep. There is a very interesting book called Chovot HaLevavot, Duties of the Heart, written by a Spanish sage many, many years ago, many centuries ago, in fact. And he says simply that it behooves man to serve God, and he goes at length, and he explains there how man is born, and how everything is so precise and perfect that from the moment of conception, how the fetus is given everything that it needs. And all of the parts that will be opened are really closed, because if they're opened, the fetus will die. And then when the baby is born, there begins to be formulate openings, and that which he received sustenance with through the umbilical cord closes. And how amazing everything is. And from that moment onwards, milk is prepared for him, food, and all of the vitamins and all of the proteins, and everything is prepared for the baby in an unbelievable way. And how it develops, etc. And he explains to us how God takes care of us. And how it behooves man to follow God's path. Whether we know and understand whether it's good for us or not good for us, or what are we gaining or not gaining, simply because of the fact that God gave us breath, God gave us life, and that's enough. If a person gave you life, if a person saved you, would you not feel a sense of beholdenness and do everything possible to always assist and help and do what's right in the eyes of that person? Of course you would. How much more so the King of all kings? That's a simple concept. Therefore, when we come along and we speak about Avraham Avinu, that this is a test, this is a major trial and test, How can this be a test when there is a what's in it for me here? The answer is because in everything there are two dimensions, and we have to see both dimensions. And every single one of us has the ability to choose. Which dimension do we want? Do we want more the temporal, the material? Or do we want the eternal, the everlasting, the spiritual? In everything there will be a dimension of the what's in it for me, or the ability to transcend oneself and serve God. So too in this very verse. The test of Abraham Avinu was precisely because God gave him reward. It was precisely because there was a what's in it for me here. God is telling him to go to the land where I will show you. Means to say, where I will show you that there is no, God is not telling him where to go yet. There's no, so to speak, set goal right now. Just leave. And when you leave, you will be blessed with all of these blessings, these three blessings. Predominantly one that he doesn't have, and that is one of children. Precisely because God promised him all of these things, this is why it's a test. To see why is Abraham Avinu willing to go forward, to travel. What's your reason behind it? God gave him all of the reasons in the book that he will benefit. And Rashi lists them. Children, wealth, and honor. And then Rashi says another one. What's the other one? One that is associated with godliness and with children. Children and spirituality, i.e. God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. Which means to say how your children will relate to spirituality. So Rashi is saying that both possibilities were there in this test. Which one will Abraham Avinu choose? Will Abraham Avinu choose the physical dimensions of what's in it for me? Or will Abraham Avinu choose that which is the supernatural, that which is not temporal, that which is enduring, and that is the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, that godliness will always be associated with their children, with his children, and they will be responsible for disseminating godliness and monotheism in the world. That's the test. Why are you going, Abraham? Why are you doing this? That's the test. God gave him. God didn't tell him, listen, I'm testing you now. I want you to go up the mountain and roll down and jump off. What possible gain? Doesn't make sense. That's a test. That's a good test. Like one of the commentaries writes, and he says, there are certain mitzvot that have physical gain as well as a spiritual gain. For example, Shabbat. Shabbat is an unbelievable spiritual gain. Yet it has unbelievable physical benefits as well. You sit together with your family, you have a wonderful meal. Tefillin. There's no physical gain whatsoever. You put on tefillin in the morning, what physical gain? It's simply a connection to God. That's it. Nothing else. Sometimes you put it on too tight, and the tefillin sometimes pinches you here and scratches you there. There's no physical gain in putting on tefillin whatsoever. Even though that I read an article that the points of putting on the tefillin, according to some Japanese study, is particular pressure points that have unbelievable influence of calming and arousing spirituality. Very interesting.
Your acupuncture points.
Acupuncture points for free. You don't have to go to Bondi Junction and pay $150. Put it on every morning. But still, put on tzitzit. What gain is it? It's hot, it's summer now, what possible gain do you have? Only spirituality, only connectivity to God, only because you're fulfilling the will of God. No other reason. Why would you wear a wool tzitzit? hot. And sometimes it goes up there and strangles you and you're struggling with it and putting it down. Like my daughter told me the other day, I took her to the dentist and it was windy. And I asked her, "You cold?" She said, "It's windy, but I'm not so cold." I said, "Oh, because I'm not cold." She said, "Of course, because you wear so many layers. You wear your shirt, you wear your jacket, you wear your t-shirt, you wear your tzitzit. You got so many layers, of course you're not." But then there are mitzvot that have physical gain. The question is, with everything that we do, with every step that we take, what is the impetus behind it? What is the motivation behind it? And being human beings, we have to be careful because we veer to what's in it for me. And that's exactly what God wanted to see from Abraham Avinu. Why is he going to be taking these steps? We all are very concerned for our children. We all want the very best for our children. But where is the main focus that we place? Look around. Let's see. People want a very good education for their children. People want to send them off to the best schools, best universities, pay for a tutor, making sure they're this, make sure they get good marks, make sure they get a good course in university. How many pay for a good tutor to teach them Torah? From a young age, so they get used to it from a young age and get broken in, so to speak, and learn Torah properly from a young age. How many are willing to say, "Look, I'm willing to forgo to a certain degree, a certain amount of secular education for Jewish education"? For maths, you pay $70. What can we do? You want them to get a good mark for on the HSC? When it comes to Jewish studies, what? $55 you charge? It's too much. How much is a mezuzah? What? $60, $70, $80? You just bought a $500 watch without blinking an eye. But when it comes to mezuzah, oh my God. What type of education? How do we teach our children? What's the focus? Of course we want them to be moral. Of course we want them to be Jewish, even spiritual. Why not? What's the focus? I want to share with you a beautiful story that I love. I love this story. This story is about a very great rabbi who lived before Second World War. His name is Reb Chaim Soloveitchik. He was a Rabbi Brisk, Reb Chaim Brisk, the famous Reb Chaim Brisk. He had a couple of children. One of his children was called Reb Zev Soloveitchik, or Reb Zev of Brisk. And he later on became a rabbi in Jerusalem. And when he was young, a cousin came to visit. This cousin was very free-thinking. Now, I want to give you a little bit of a history. There's always been somewhat of a friction, or between a conflict and friction between Jewish studies and secular studies. Now, Maimonides writes that if you use secular studies either to earn a livelihood or to gain better insight and knowledge and understanding of Torah, whatever the case may be, to understand the constellation, that's good and fine. But otherwise, if you're studying it just for the sake of studying it, or philosophy, or whatever the case may be, just for the sake of studying, you're retracting, you're taking away from studying Torah, which is the greatest pursuit of all. But if there's a point and purpose, you're earning a livelihood, then that's fine. And in Sephardi lands, they were very fluent in secular studies. In Ashkenazi lands, they were very against secular studies for many reasons. One of the reasons, especially in the last couple of centuries, is because either the Gentiles, the rulers of the country, especially the Tsars, יימח שמם וזכרם, or the liberal left-wing reformists of Judaism sought to undermine Jewish education. Therefore, they want to slam down the throats of Jews secular education, not because they wanted them to be more knowledgeable, because they wanted them to uproot them from Judaism. Here you have a Tsar who's implementing all of these laws, forcing Jews to go and study secular studies, of which his whole population is illiterate. What are you coming to the Jewish nation, who every single child at 3-4 years old knows how to read Hebrew and knows how to study his language, and you're coming and you're forcing, worry about your own people first. Give them a nice, well-rounded education. Bring them up from the level of from being serfs. Let them earn, teach them trades, teach them a livelihood, and all of these things. What do you worry about the Jews? Because they wanted to uproot the Jews. They wanted to uproot Jewish education. So they looked upon it with a lot of disdain and with a lot of suspicion. What are you coming to us? Because that was the impetus, that was the reason behind it. So giving you the backdrop, they were very much against secular education. As well, we find in Morocco and in Iraq, as well as in Egypt, there was what's called Alliance. Alliance were Jews who were very secular-minded, who wanted to break the Jews' connection to Torah. And so they came in with schools, modern schools, teaching French and teaching this and teaching that, and whether they lured him in by being free and whatever the point, whatever the case was, many Jews who went to these schools became very secular and totally, if not to many degrees, but some of them totally abandoned Judaism. Now I will tell you the story, now understanding the suspicion in regards to secularism. We don't have the same focus as what it was before, the same days it was before, but still. So a cousin of this rabbi comes along and says, who was much more modern thinking, much more into the secular world, into secular thinking and secular studies. And he said, so what's going to be with your Zev, with your Velvel? In Yiddish, you say Zev, you call him Velvel. What's going to be with your Velvel? He says, it's going to be a Rosh Yeshiva. You're going to have to teach him secular studies. Today, if you want to be a head of a yeshiva, you've got to know secular studies, you've got to know how to write, you've got to know the language, you've got to know everything, you've got to make notes, and you've got to submit forms to the government. So the rabbi said, so my son won't be a Rosh Yeshiva. So what's he going to be? He's going to be a rabbi, surely. Today, a rabbi has to fill out the forms, births, deaths, marriages. He's going to have to fill out all the forms, submit them to the government. Surely, I have to teach him secular education. Better start now. So he says, no. So he won't be a rabbi. So he says, 1 second. He's not going to be a Rosh Yeshiva. He's not going to be a head of a yeshiva. He's not going to be a rabbi. So what's he going to be? So he says, so he'll be poor. But he'll know the Talmud thoroughly. Do you understand my point in this story? We all want good for our children, but what type of good? So this rabbi was willing to forgo all of the material good for the sake that his child will be thorough in Jewish education. And indeed, such was the case. He was fluent in the Torah. He ended up being a rabbi in Jerusalem. And you know what? He was never missing bread. He never lacked bread. They didn't starve in his family. But the reason why I'm using this story is because we all want good for our family. What's the focus? What's the drive behind? What do we want them to succeed more in? What are we willing to give and take? What are we willing to sacrifice more? The what's in it for me, to what degree does it play the what's in it for me here? So God is promising Abraham Avinu all the blessings. Children, here you go. What are you going to do with those children? Wealth, here you go. What are you going to do with that wealth? Honor, well, here you go. What are you going to do with the honor? Are you going to use the children for them to become big giants and build Trump towers? The money, the wealth, what are you going to use it for? The honor, are you going to use it for God's glory? What are you going to use it for? This was the test. This was the test. God gave him everything. It was almost like There's no spirit, almost like no spirituality here. Rashi says there was. What was the focus of him wanting children? What was the focus of him willing to dedicate their lives to Torah? And that's the second interpretation where Rashi says, your children will say the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. In other words, your children will be totally connected to godliness. Which of the opinion do you think Abraham Avinu went for? What do you think? Which one? How do we know? Because it says over here, Vayelech Abraham, and Abraham went, he did what God said, Ka'asher diber elav Hashem, as God spoke with him. He went because God spoke with him. He went because God told him to go. Not for any ulterior motive, not for any other reason. The steps that he took was not for his benefit. And then it says right after that, Vayelech ito Lot. Now Lot was his nephew. Lot went along, he tagged along. Why did Lot go? It doesn't say Lot went because God revealed himself to Abraham Avinu. Lot went with Abraham. Abraham's going to get all the blessings, all the wealth, and all of the... And so far he doesn't have any heirs. I'm his only heir. I'm going with Abraham. Hey Abraham, have you made your will yet? Put me in your will. So Lot went because Abraham was promised all of these blessings. Abraham went because God.
How did he know that God said that?
Sorry? Who know? Lot?
No, how did Abraham knew that God commanded?
Vayomer Hashem el Abraham. God spoke to Abraham. It says clearly in the Bible. There was a revelation. There was
How did he know?
a prophecy. Let me tell you something. If God reveals himself to you, you'll know, believe me. How do you know I'm speaking to you now? Joanna, how do you know I'm speaking to you now? You know. Don't worry. God will speak to you. You'll know about it. Don't worry. Much more than you know me speak, I'm speaking to you. And this leads us to the more Kabbalistic interpretation of why God spelled out these three concepts. Leave your land, leave the place of your birth, leave the house of your father. These are three levels. House of your father in Kabbalistic terminology, house of your father. Father, whenever you say in Kabbalah, Av, it refers to wisdom. Chokhmah. Wisdom. Eretz comes from the word Ratzon, your will. Moladetecha, where you're born, leave refers to where you acquired your natural tendencies. What God is telling him is, you want to serve me? You want to serve me, you have to leave everything behind. All your conventional knowledge and wisdom of what you knew and understood about God, got to leave behind. To transcend oneself, to serve God, to enter godliness means total transcendence, even of your godly wisdom, even of your godly understanding, even of your godly will and desire. The what's in it for me could also apply in spiritual matters. What's in it for me spiritually? I want to gain. I want to become a godly person. I want to come closer to God. Leave your natural tendencies. We all have natural tendencies. Some are good. The bad ones, of course, we have to leave. But the good ones we also have to leave behind. Why? Because if we serve God simply because we want to, then that's not the service of God. If we give charity because we are charitable and we're good people, that's not called serving God. That's called serving yourself. That's your own self-interest. You're giving charity because you have mercy upon that person. It's good to have mercy. It's a beautiful thing to have mercy. But you got to pinch yourself. To serve God, you got to pinch yourself. You got to push yourself beyond your limitations, beyond your comfort zone. It's got to hurt. That's service of God. So when you give, and you give your comfort zone, That's giving because that's who you are. You're a good person. God created you with a good nature. But that's not godly. That's you. You are serving God according to what you're used to, or with a nature that He Himself gave you. If you have a particular talent, nothing to be excited about. That's a talent that God gave you. So mahidush, maributa, what is here what here is novel of the fact that you are serving God with what He gave you. Serve God with what He, so to speak, didn't give you. When you go beyond yourself, that's called serving God. And that's why, according to many, the first test or the first major tribulations that Abraham Avinu went through was not worthy of being one of the 10. Why? Because when he was thrown into a fire, he was willing to sacrifice himself for what he believed in, for what was important for him. I read a book many years ago by a great psychiatrist or psychologist called Logotherapy, Searching for Meaning. And he writes in the book that 67% of people will give up their life for something meaningful in their lives. Even a dog. That's not serving God. If you are willing to give up your life for something that you love or something that is important for you, risk your life to save a dog, that's great. That's meaningful. But that's not godly. That's not transcending oneself. That's doing things for what's in it for me. Even a moral or a spiritual reason is still what's in it for me. When Abraham Avinu was so connected to God and believed in God to the extent that he could not bow even to fake it, to Nimrod, he could have faked it. Just bow, fake it, that's it, and then I'll live a nice long life. I don't believe in him. He's an idiot. He's a nothing. He has to go to the toilet and he's telling me bow down to him. What kind of God is he? Who's he fooling? He doesn't go to the bathroom. He doesn't do what he needs. He doesn't eat, doesn't sleep. Who's he fooling, Nimrod? Yet because he was so powerful and he was so influential and was so successful in battle that he believed that he was a god, that he was invincible. Hitler, by the way, also believed that. Hitler survived to a certain degree. He believed in fate. Fate chose him for his role. I don't remember how he transmitted that, either through writing or through the people in a circle around him. But he defied how many? 40-something? How many? It was 40-something plots against him, murder plots against him. He survived all of them. Except the one that he himself gave to himself. He didn't survive that one. Because he knew where to find him. There are those who are crazed people who believe so much in themselves. You know what? They're not so crazy. We also have a certain belief in ourselves, our immortality, until, God forbid, something happens. And then we see how much we are needy of God. How many people remember God in their young years? Of course, unless if they're brought up religious or they study in yeshiva. How many people really are committed to God in their younger years? It's only through experience that life teaches you how much you need God, how dependent you are on God. So there are many who believe that first trial that Abraham went through was not worthy of being one of the 10. Maimonides is one of them. Because he was simply proving to himself his mettle. He was living by his goals, by his ideals, and that's normal. 67% of people will do that. So Abraham Avinu is one of the 67%. Is that remarkable? It's not remarkable. Not worthy of being in one of the 67. One of the 10. According to Rabbeinu Yonah, according to another opinion, that was one of the 10. How do we explain that? So I thought about that a little bit. And before we can go spiritual, we have to develop as much intellectually and emotionally connection to God as possible before we can go to the next step. It's like David HaMelech says to Shlomo, "V'ata Shlomo b'ni da et Elokei avicha ve'ovdeu b'levav shalem." Now, Solomon, my son, know the God of your father and serve him with a full heart. What's the difference between know the God of your father? Why not know God? Why the God of your father? Because it refers to two attributes. Know your God. You have a private and intimate relation with God, and the God of your father is that which you received through faith. To serve God through faith is a much greater level than to serve God through one's intellect. But without intellect will always interfere in your faith. You have to quiet and still the intellect before you can laf'il, how do you say laf'il? To turn on the antennas of emunah, of faith. Because emunah transcends the intellect. Faith transcends the intellect. You can only understand so much. And as I always explain, intellect is the antenna of the body. Faith is the antenna of the soul, which is greater. The antenna of the soul. But if you don't answer the questions of the intellect, it'll be very hard for you. Unless you are those that are able to bypass the intellect and go directly to faith. And there are those that are able to do that. In other words, go directly to the soul, access your soul. But for a regular person, it's difficult. So you have to go level by level, stage by stage. And that's why we study so much. We understand, we realize the greatness and the truth of Torah. Sometimes people question. It just shows a total lack of understanding and appreciation of Torah. If they only understood and learned just a little bit. They'll be on a total different plane, a totally different level. But their question reveal that they know nothing. They don't know enough. But if we were to learn to study, then we wouldn't have all of these doubts and all of these questions, and then we'd have the ability and the peace of mind to access our soul. So too, one can answer that was, according to Rabbeinu Yonah, that was the first test, because you have to be the best you can on the human level. You have to be the best you can on the intellectual and on the emotional level before you can access the spiritual level. And perhaps one then can suggest that is why that was the first test. Now we move on to the next test. And the next test is to transcend even that. To serve God, not because you understand, not because you want, not because you used to, or what this was you were taught, or this is your tradition, or this is your religion, or your father, or your grandfather, or whatever the case may be, and you're emotionally attached. Because that is the essence, the core of life. And you lose yourself within the presence of God. And that is the service of God. And that is what is God demanding of Abraham Avinu. Leave all of that behind. Now, how will I know that you left all of that behind? Let's see what the reason is. So I'm giving you all of these sweeteners. Let's see if you take it. Who will not take it? We all want it. Sometimes we do things spiritual because, God, I'm praying with such intensity. I'm praying for them because we have a particular problem or a particular issue. We want that solved. How many people don't even feel that problem because all they see is godliness? It's not a problem. Like the famous story about someone who came to the Holy Maggid, and with this we'll stop, we're going over time. The Holy Maggid said, Rabbi, how the Gemara says, Kishem shemevarech ala tov, kach yavarech ala ra'ah. Just as a person blesses over the good, the Gemara there says, if something good happens, you say, Shehayanu, you say, Atov ha'metiv, you say, thank God. So the Gemara says, just as you bless over the good, so too you must bless over the bad. Simply means, there's a blessing for good, there's a blessing for bad. We acknowledge that God brings the good, and God is the same God who brought the bad. The world doesn't run on its own, then there's a reason. But the deeper meaning is Keshem, just as. In other words, with the same feelings, with the same emotions, with the same excitement and acceptance. Who rejects bad? The good. Who says, oh God, I'm totally undeserving of this? We say it, but we still, we say it. But when God forbid something bad happens, so why am I deserving? Why me? Why this? Why that? But when we win the lotto, we don't say, why me? We say, I've been waiting for this for a long time. What took you so long, God? What took you so long? So the Gemara says, Kshem, just as, with the same feeling of acceptance, of joy, that you bless over the good, so too with the same joy you bless over the bad. So one person came to the Holy Maggid and said, Rebbe, how can we reach this level? He says, I want you to go to Rebbe Reb Zusha, one of my favorite all-time greats, the Rebbe Reb Zusha. Go to his house. He will teach you how to make the blessing with these same, of a bad, the same feelings that you say over good. So he goes to Reb Zusha's house, and he sees such abject poverty. He's sitting, Labriyut, Haim Tovim, he's sitting on an upside-down crate, and the floor is all muddy in those days. It wasn't like tile today. If you had some money, then, wood or whatever, and carpets. But those who weren't, the walls were sinking into the mud. The windows were broken. Wind was coming in. There was leaks in the roof, and water was coming in. He didn't have a proper table. Didn't have proper plates. And he comes in and he sees all of this, and Reb Zusha gets up and he welcomes him. Hi, how are you? And come in. What brings you here? He says, so he tells him, the Rebbe came here for me to learn from you how to bless over bad, how to appreciate when God gives us bad, and how to say it with the same blessing of excitement. Like a child with wonder in his eyes, Reb Zusha looks at him and says, why did he send you to me? I never experienced bad in my life. He's looking around, the poverty. He doesn't know anyone poorer than him, and he can say such a thing. That's when you lose yourself. That's when you don't exist. Only godliness exists. But you only godliness, so therefore there's no bad. You don't feel yourself. This is what it means to be a forefather. This was the test that God tested of Abraham Avinu. Furthermore, we find in the pasuk later on, it says, "Vayelech Abraham haloch v'nasoa hanegba." Abraham went and traveled to the Negev. Anybody been in Israel? Where's the Negev? The desert. Not a place conducive for wealth, is it? You don't go to the Negev, especially if you have animals. In those days, how did you become wealthy? Animals and gold. But animals, that's how people became wealthy in those days. The more animals you have, the more wealthy you are. You don't go to the Negev, there's nothing to eat there. It shows that Abraham Avinu, when he traveled to the land of Israel, he didn't travel for material gain. He traveled for spiritual gain. Negev comes from the word nagav. In Hebrew means to dry. It's dry and arid. There's nothing there. So Abraham Avinu proved himself to be a forefather of the fact that he went because God told him to go. He saw the other dimension. When he educated his children not for the material gain, which we all want and wish for our children, of course, but predominantly for the spiritual gain, for the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. Are there any questions? We'll stop here. Are there any questions?